So in July of 2022, my mom and I reconnected with some friends that we had met in Antarctica a couple of years ago, and my good friend David from here in Seattle, and reunited for a trip to the Arctic. We spent a week in Iceland and then headed over to Norway and Svalbard, which I'll get into in a bit. So that was the group there in that first picture. This is Peter, our tour guide um, for Iceland. We had two different tour guides while we were on the trip, one in Iceland and one in Svalbard and Norway. We started off in Reykjavik and the outskirts of Reykjavik, and then headed over to Vik on the southern end of Iceland. There's lots and lots of geothermal activity in Iceland. I hadn't realized how extensive it is, but the heating, the hot water is all natural geothermal there in Iceland. We're able to do quite a bit of exploring. We took an amphibious vehicle out into the water at one point in time amongst the icebergs. Um, lots of exploration. There's not a lot of people in Iceland, but there's lots of things to do and see. Uh, the four-wheel drive trip took us out to a bunch of glaciers. We spent a few days in Reykjavik. I mentioned this is a church in Reykjavik, and then this is the view of the town from the top of the church. And we were able to beg Peter to let us stop at a distillery one day because Wendy's trip to anywhere wouldn't be complete without whiskey. So this is the Imworks distillery that's in Reykjavik. Um, they have something called sheep dung smoked whiskey that we were able to try, which I highly do not recommend. So, lots of waterfalls all through the drive from Reykjavik all the way out to Vik. There were lots of waterfalls to stop in. Really, really pretty. And I mentioned we did a four-wheel drive trip. So this was our four-wheel drive bus that took us out on the dirt road. But unfortunately, we had to cross lots of rivers and it got
All right,
slippery.
let's see.
Luckily, another bus was there and was able to get us out.
There it goes. All right.
But we still have to get across.
Yeah, we do.
A little bit of an adventure that was unplanned for the day. And that's the other bus that pulled us out. Like you said, we got very lucky. They were close by. And so all the way down that road, we crossed lots and lots of rivers that were really high. We needed the four-wheel drive bus, but it was absolutely gorgeous. So that's Jane on the left-hand side. She was someone we met in the Arctic or in Iceland, and then later went with us to the Arctic. Um, Lots of glaciers. So you can't see them very well, but on the very top of that last one were people walking around. There was a glacier hike. Puffins, we saw puffins, quite a few puffins on the trip. Um, After the week in Iceland, we headed over to Oslo in Norway, and this is the Oslo Opera House. You can actually walk all the way across up to the top of it, and you get a beautiful view of the city from the top. We also visited City Hall, where the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony takes place. So it takes place right there, and this is outside of the City Hall. Um, there's so much to see and do in Oslo. It's one of my favorite cities. It's the second time I've been there, but I just love it. And then this is the Nobel Peace Center where you can go and find out more about the peace prizes that have been given away in the past. And so there's also Vigeland Park there in Oslo, and that statue that was just there was from Vigeland Park, which is a sculpture park. That Svalbard picture got out of place. Sorry. So we spent just a couple of days in Oslo, and then we headed north. So Svalbard is an archipelago between Norway and the North Pole. So it's a group of islands that are situated north of the North Pole. And so we flew into a town called Longyearbyen. This is a seed vault in Longyearbyen that's in Svalbard. We spent a few days there. Svalbard has a lot of the northernmost things in the world. So this is me and the northernmost pub in the world. Um, the brewery, unfortunately, was closed, so we had to have the northernmost beer at the northernmost brewery, from the northernmost brewery in the northernmost pub in Longyearbyen. That was David and my mom. Snowmobiles are a huge thing, of course, for getting around in Svalbard most of the year. it's much easier to travel by snowmobile. But you do need to carry protection because it is polar bear territory. And when you get out to the edges of town, you'll see signs like the one that was just there, very famous signs warning you about the polar bears. So from Longyearbyen, we boarded our ship that was going to spend basically the next 9 days going around Svalbard. So that's a seal that we saw on the ice as we were in our first few days out on the boat. At this point in time, there was no cell phone reception. So for the next 9 days, we were pretty isolated, which was fantastic. Lots and lots to see and do despite that, including our buddies, the walruses. So we would take a Zodiac to shore each day or just riding around each day. Um, and that was really cool. So we boarded the Zodiac and then either we would just do a tour around or we would actually go to land. And sometimes you couldn't go to land because that white lump in the back there is a polar bear. And if there were polar bears seen, then we, of course, were not allowed to go to land. But we were so excited the first time we saw our first polar bear, which was just a couple of days into the trip. So he was a white splotch in the distance, and then we saw a few more that day, including this guy who wound up being curious and coming up to pay us a visit on the shoreline. There's a video coming up in just a second. He's very curious about us.
He's trying to decide if we are dinner or not.
He was a little skinny. Came up and checked us out, but our guide said he was skinny, but not scary skinny. Just could have used a good meal. That's me and Mom and Betsy in one of the Zodiacs one day out on the ice. We were very, very bundled up. So on board the ship, we were having fun. This is our David in the narwhal hat pretending to drink whiskey. That's Carlos, our tour guide, there in the front with the group of us. That's Amber on the right-hand side. Amber wasn't in Iceland with us, but she joined us in when we got to Svalbard. So we met her up there. Um, lots of ice, as I mentioned. Probably said that a few times, but anyway, this is what the landing looked like when we brought the Zodiacs to land. So it was always wet landings. You needed wet boots to get in. This is the exit from the boat getting onto the Zodiacs. So we would leave to go onto the Zodiacs 2, 3, 4 times a day, depending. And then that's the boats lining up outside waiting to pick us up off the boat. Um, that's our ship in the distance. I took this picture from a Zodiac. I actually won a photo contest on board with this picture. All the pictures here, I think except one or two, were taken by me with my iPhone. So just basic iPhone because I bought it before the trip and decided not to carry a separate camera. So one of our first stops after we left Longyearbyen and headed north was the town of Ny-Ålesund, which is here. That's another do not go outside of town without a protection sign because of the polar bears. And then this is a statue of Amundsen, the explorer, the northernmost bust in the world. This is the northernmost hotel in the world there in Ny-Ålesund, followed by the northernmost museum in the world, also in Ny-Ålesund. That's Mom. We spent a few hours there shopping, sending postcards. Well, trying to send postcards. Turns out you couldn't actually send them from there. So we went on a few hikes. This is one of the walks we went on. Those are birds chasing people. They got too close to the nesting site, and we were warned about going too close to the nesting sites. If you did, then the birds got really angry. These are our buddies, the walruses. I think that other picture got out of order. We were able to get pretty close to them. There were about 10 or 15 there just hanging out on the shore. Didn't really care about us that much. Some in the water. It was kind of looked like scratching himself in the water, just rubbing up against the rocks. They didn't really do a whole lot. There's one off in the ocean a little further out. I see him swimming.
Something in the
camera's clicking. There's him. You can see the tusks really well in that picture, I think. Everywhere we went, they had to set up a perimeter. So the gun in the guy's hand, and this is one of our expedition leaders, and they pretty much set up a perimeter everywhere we went to watch for polar bears. And we weren't able to go past the guys with the guns or the women with the guns in some cases. Um, so after we left Nyalison, we started heading north, and all that ice in front was the Arctic pack ice. So we actually headed to
Yeah.
about a day's sail north of
Look at
Svalbard
that. Ice everywhere.
to get up to the polar ice cap.
Yeah, you can hear it.
I took quite a few videos. I added quite a few videos from this section because this was just so amazing. Like,
You can hear it. I love the noise.
not a whole lot.
That crackle pop. Oh, wow, look at that one. Here the thunder is. It hits the side of the boat.
Hear the ice. We went like this for probably half a day, sailing through ice like this.
It goes right under it.
Big hunks of ice.
Ice as far as you can see.
I know this part is long. It's pretty special. We were 82 degrees north, 15 minutes. So the North Pole would have been 90 degrees. We were pretty close. Um, and on one of the days, we started heading back a little bit, and we noticed that the expeditions leaders were setting up that flag and such on this iceberg off to the side of the ship, and we realized that we were about to be able to land on the iceberg.
Alright, so we were able to actually land on an ice pack ice. Oh, there's David! Wave, David! Oh my goodness. There's our ship, and I am on ice. Mom, wave! Kathy, wave! How cool is that? Oh my goodness. We just took the Zodiacs over from the boat. We're only able to stay here for about 10 minutes, but it's literally just a piece of ice.
It was pretty cool. We weren't expecting that. We just got really lucky on the weather. The captain was able to let us do it. It's another view of the boats getting ready to pick us up. This is the loading area. So this is one of the club rooms on the boat. Every day when we got ready to go on to the Zodiacs, we loaded up there and lined up there and then climbed down that ladder to go out to the boats. Became a regular process. We got good at it by the end. Another polar bear there, that white splotch in the background is a polar bear. We saw 15 or 16 polar bears during the few days that we were there. And this is our lovely group out on the Zodiac. I didn't take this picture. I think somebody else did on the trip, but it's pretty cool. It's a nice close-up of the birds. And then on one day on one of our trips, we were able to see this mama bear and her two cubs. We were able to watch them for quite a while, which was so incredibly cool. They're feeding on a walrus, which is closer and closer, all the boats did, but the mother and cubs didn't seem to care, so they let us stay. We were about 20 feet away from them by the time before we got ready to leave. Um, they said that the cubs are second year, they're pretty big, so they think that they're second year cubs.
She said it's time for a nap.
Yeah, Mama was full by that time, so she just splatted out on the
Full belly.
rocks, and the cubs were hanging out for a while. He came over to the edge to see us. We were really close. I think you'll be able to see one of the boats near him soon, so you can see how close the boats got, but really close by. But they weren't disturbed. They were just ignoring us for the most part. There's a
She's
couple of
curious.
female bears off in the distance, and they said that if they had been male bears, it would have been a different situation. They would have been fighting over the
He
female. They
says,
would have been
no,
more nervous.
I'm not going to
But
come
because
see
they were
y'all today.
females, they
The
just
boats
took
are
turns
just
feeding on the
right
calves.
there.
There's the boat. Getting some closer. It's beautiful. We watched for probably an hour and a half, just floating by and then repositioning and floating back. There's a still picture of them. That was like one of the biggest highlights of the whole trip. It was just cool. And there you go. I love that picture. I might have taken a few polar bear pictures. We just didn't ever think we would get that close. So when we got that close, it was surprising and shocking. We were pretty happy with the dot in the distance originally. There's Mama splatting out on the beach taking a nap. After that, we did another zodiac trip later that same day that took us out to this bird colony along the rocks. I think these are in the right order, but there's a video coming up. You can hear how loud they are. More birds everywhere. It's the chicks were hatched and were getting ready to go off on their own. All over that lake was just
Wow.
They said that in another month, all of the birds would be gone and came back to this place would be empty. It's hard to imagine given how many there are. The chicks were everywhere. Made a few other stops. I don't remember what this one is called, but that was a research cabin there on the stop. And then you could also do a hike up one of the hills that David was very hardy and did. Um, we took a detour at this point in time and we were able to see whales. So we went up one of the passages. That's a fin whale, which is like the second largest whale um, that exists. There's a video. There you go, you can see them. So many of them. How cool is that? I mean,
Oh my goodness, they're huge.
there's the lead guy. Whooshing. Love the noise they make. After that, we actually one of the same island. No, a different island. That was beluga whale bones that we just saw. So, just not that long ago, I think just around the Second World War, they were harvesting belugas there, and it's really, really sad to see it's a seal perched on a
Okay. We woke up at 6 o'clock this morning as we were just coming into this glacier. It's about 100 feet high, 5,000 square meters.
last zodiac stops. It's just really pretty with the way that the sun was hitting the clouds. And that was a
You can see our ship
expedition
off
leader
there
with a
in the
gun,
distance. You hear the
protecting us
birds.
from polar bears. We went back on the ship that day. That was so nice. The crew organized us a picnic on board. Had nice picnic, and then we noticed they were filling up the pool with ice. So they had promised us that they would try to let us do a polar plunge. So in the Arctic, you can't go in the ocean because of the snow. So, but you can go in the pool. It was just as cold as you can imagine because it still was in the Arctic, and the water was pumped in from the ocean. So we're very proud, though. A few of us that plunged in the Antarctic together were able to do the same thing, sort of, in the Arctic, which was really cool. And then, of course, we had whiskey afterwards because that's what you do. We didn't say we were roughing it. At the end of the trip, with that part, we headed back into Longyearbyen, and then we were able to fly back from Longyearbyen to Oslo. And we ended the trip in Oslo. I have a good friend named Truls who lived there, and we were able to spend some time with him before coming home. It was quite magical.